Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news, which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully, you're having an amazing day. We have lots of stuff to get through in this video. I want to start things out though with a piece of news which actually concerns both Intel and AMD, as there are two very interesting stories floating around that have basically emerged almost simultaneously, and it could well paint a picture of Intel doing any and everything they can to get back into the competitive desktop arena, and AMD potentially taking their foot off the gas. So let me set the scene just briefly. As I'm sure most people are aware by now, Intel has recently released the Comet Lake series of processors, with the top-end SKU being the 10900K. And from my own testing, I'll put out a video soon, I have to say that it's fairly impressive for gaming. It does definitely outperform the 9900K, but it is hard to argue that the Ryzen 3000 series is extremely impressive, and it is definitely more power efficient and also, of course, does have more processor cores. So whereas Intel do have the advantage in applications which really stress high clock frequencies, and that also includes a lot of games, unless of course you're going for really high resolutions, AMD do win in multi-threading, especially for example like video encoding, those type of tasks. And either way, the leap from, let's say, Ryzen 2000 series to the 3000 series is hard to argue with. Furthermore, there are rumours that the Ryzen 3000 series will get a refresh, and this will include the 3900 XT and the 3700 XT and the 3600 XT. We don't know if the 3950 will be getting a refresh. Allegedly, this will launch on the 7th of July, which is a year to the day that we saw the Ryzen 3000 series launch. So, what we are pretty damn certain of is Rocket Lake is going to launch as soon as humanly possible for Intel. There were even reports that it could launch as early as late this year, let's say late Q4, but most realistically, it's looking like it's going to be Q1 that Intel get the thing out the door. And it also appears that the motherboards for Comet Lake will be compatible with Rocket Lake, which is obviously a good thing. Forwards and backwards compatibility is definitely good. Anyway, the reason I've spent the last couple of minutes going through like a history lesson is because there are some very interesting rumours that are floating around, and these come from DigiTimes, which the retired engineer on Twitter has actually translated. So seriously, massive thanks to Chia for actually translating this, because obviously machine translation can be a little dicey. I will link his translation as well as the original article, of course, in the video description. Now, it's imperative to realize that this is rumor, so it could be totally inaccurate, and we could see an entirely different outcome from AMD's processors. But here's the thing, and I'll go through the gist here. Allegedly, motherboard manufacturers are saying that Ryzen 3000 series are selling extremely well. I'm sure most of us would agree that you can regularly see CPUs like the 3600 and 3700 being just snapped up by gamers, because if you are building a budget-focused rig, the 3600, for example, is a stellar processor for the price. And the 3700, once again, it makes a really nice CPU. You can throw in, say, an RTX 2070 Super, and you're good to go. Absolutely stellar processor. And because of that, motherboards have also been selling extremely well too. So allegedly, AMD are actually extending the life cycle of the Ryzen 3000 series, and they will be holding back the launch of the Ryzen 4000 series. Now, Ryzen 4000 is based on the Zen 3 architecture, and thus well, offer quite a decent IPC leap. I'm hearing minimum of 10%, but most likely it could be up to 20%. And there are several reasons behind the discrepancy. Obviously, it does depend on the instruction that's being run. Also, it depends on things like how sensitive the application is to clock frequency. But also in games, I suspect that the advantage is going to be bigger, simply because games quite frequently with the current Ryzen 3000 CCX layout can often be hampered with the latencies associated with the level 3 cache and lots of other reasons as well. Either way, according to DigiTimes, there is a possibility that we will not see the Ryzen 4000 series enter mass production until the end of 2020 and therefore launch in the early part of 2021. It's looking like it's going to be January for the January CES that we're going to see it launch, but whether it's going to be available in retail in January or whether that's going to be, say, February, we don't know. Furthermore, they are still stating that they don't know whether we are still going to see it on the 7nm process. They are still saying that there's a possibility it could be on 5nm. I've gone into the whole 5nm thing really in depth several hundred times in the past, but just briefly, this is not a simple matter of just going into Photoshop or whatever and just shrinking down the processor and saying, yep, good to go. It doesn't work like that. And they would need to basically change the design, revalidate it, test it, and yeah, it's quite a lot of work. I don't honestly know whether they would have time to do it. There's a very good chance, though, that if AMD were aware that 5nm from TSMC was a viable option, maybe they started it early. I'm not convinced, though, that they would shift the design to 5nm. Because even AMD's recent roadmap, which popped up a few days ago, officially from the company, they said that Zen 3 was on the 7nm process. Admittedly, they did not state that explicitly, though, for the desktop processors. So the only way you could really look at that is the desktop CPUs would be using 5nm, and then, just for example, servers would be using some type of 7nm? That would be really bizarre. But either way, if nothing else, we can take away that AMD allegedly are going to be holding back the launch of their processors. And they were originally intended to launch in September. Now, I have to admit, I would be surprised if this is the case. It would certainly mean that AMD are taking their foot off the gas quite considerably. Now, AMD have stated multiple times that Zen will launch this year, although I guess technically it could be on a non-desktop processor, or they could change their plans. Once again, I'm not convinced that this is the case, but here's some further information, and it's to do with Intel and Rocket Lake. Credit to Moore's Law is dead. I'll link his video in the description, although I have to say that Rocket Lake could be a very interesting option for Intel. Apparently, Intel are referring to Rocket Lake as Cypress Cove cores. They're not Willow Cove, although they are kind of based on the same architecture. Now, of course, you cannot just backport 10nm to 14nm perfectly because of, well, multiple factors. So it's probable we will not see a massive IPC gain like the 25% or so that you would associate with a true Tiger Lake processor. This, by the way, is because you have around an 18% jump with Sunny Cove, and then Willow Cove is around another 7%, 8% IPC. So you can kind of just round that up and round that down and say 25%. But allegedly, it does feature only 8 processor cores, and this is mostly because of heat and power consumption, apparently. But despite the fact that the IPC is less than what we have with true Willow Cove, it's made up for by much higher clock frequency. According to the information that Tom's received, it's hitting over 4.7 gigahertz, which is nothing to be sneezed at. That's really impressive, particularly given if AMD can achieve that for all processor cores. Obviously, the magic figure, especially for PR reasons, is 5 gigahertz. It could be a very interesting processor. Out of respect for Tom's video, I don't want to just say all of the information that he's put out there, because obviously that would be really unfair to him. After all, he's put lots of work into the video, so I'd encourage you to go check it out. But the gist here is that AMD may be taking their foot off the gas, whereas Intel are doing any and everything they can to apply the pressure. In fact, according to Tom's information, there is a possibility that we could see the CPUs launch this year, which would be an incredible feat given how much actual engineering work there is here. Now, I'm sure someone in the comments is immediately already typing out, yes, but AMD would have double the processor cores, and you are definitely right. But, and I say this in complete ignorance on what the final clock frequencies of both processors will be, I'm guessing AMD will still have a clock frequency disadvantage to Intel. I think Intel will still have an advantage over AMD. Probably not significantly, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 2 to maybe even 300 megahertz, depending how it all shapes up. And lastly, I do think AMD will still have an IPC disadvantage compared to this, even if we don't have the full 25% uplift in performance from Skylake to Cypress Cove as what you would have from Skylake to Willow Cove. The good news is, from our perspectives, well, it is good news, because I think the people who are going to win here will be us, as the people who are actually plonking our cash down to purchase this damn stuff. In the end, I suspect that gamers may prefer to go with Rocket Lake, and once again, I do not have the final performance numbers here, so it could be totally wrong. And I suspect that people who more want content creation and that type of thing may end up going with AMD. But either way, both companies will have very compelling solutions. And I suspect that the roadmap for both companies is also going to be insane. I'm pretty damn sure that Golden Cove, for example, and Ocean Cove for Intel are really, really impressive. I'm hearing that the IPC gains for both are pretty tremendous. And of course, for AMD too, Zen 3 is very good, but Zen 4 and other future Zen architectures too are not anything to be sneezed at. To summarize, whether AMD will put the Ryzen 4000 series on the 5nm node, is, well, dubious at best. But there are certainly hints that they will be holding back the CPUs with this refresh. Then again, you could take the refresh with the 3600 XT, for example, as just being an easy processor to launch. And importantly, there is no official kind of hints that they are actually going to be postponing the launch of the Ryzen 4000 series until later than perhaps many had hoped for. So all we can do is wait on this one. I'm hoping that they don't take the foot off the gas and they keep plowing forward. But either way, it's going to be fascinating to see how Intel, in the short term anyway, can respond with Rocket Lake. And now, from Intel and AMD, let's move over to the PlayStation 5, as yet more is happening with the PS5's OS this time. And this is thanks to the PlayStation VP of UX design, Matt McLaurin. And he has said that the new operating system is basically an entire overhaul compared to the PlayStation 4 UI, and there is also a lot of different concepts that have been put in place. This was based on some comments he made on LinkedIn. He said that the new PlayStation 5 UI performance is being actually measured in milliseconds across the board. So in other words, it's responsive and snappy. He also said that he believes that the PlayStation marketing team are the best in the business, and they're comparable to Nest in their prime, but profitable. Ouch. Brilliant marketing always looks effortless. Furthermore, I'd like to thank Asilium, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, Asilium Core X, for actually letting me know about this on Twitter. He also said that we'll be showing more of the operating system soon, that is Matt, and I'm sure there'll be special editions for everyone. I'm hoping for Horizon Forbidden West special edition in regards to the UI interface. Now, to my understanding, at the moment, the development kits of the PlayStation 5, as of a couple of months ago, a month ago or so, the basically the graphical user interface is identical to that of the PlayStation 4, albeit with a few differences. That is that the uh, obviously the OS supports things like being able to quickly switch to different games and so on. But I was told quite early on by developers that they are pretty damn certain that this is going to change when the consoles get closer to launch. Obviously, the OS is something, or the GUI at the very least, is something that Sony were working on, and it wasn't the let's say focus of Sony to get that into the hands of developers, because at the end of the day it's not really impacting their ability to develop software on it. It's not like, just for the sake of argument, the graphics drivers would explode or something like that if you tried to do 3D work. It wasn't anything like that. It was just the actual design of the actual aesthetic and some of the functionality, which is kind of the cool stuff which users can expect from the closer to final production hardware. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing what Sony does with this. Although I must admit, I'm curious about the habits other people have here. I must admit, I'm one of those people that really doesn't do much on my console other than game. I don't use it for Netflix. I don't use the YouTube app. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't do like sharing with friends. Maybe I'm just an unsociable individual. I don't know. I just kind of just game goes in, game starts, game switches. That's it. So I maybe shoot a message or something like that to one of my friends if they're online, and that's pretty much it. Um, Whereas obviously with PC gaming for me it's quite different because I use my PC for like a million things. But maybe it's just because like the mentality I've had for being a console gamer for so long. I just tend to use the system purely for gaming, and I don't really do what many of you do, I'm guessing, and kind of use it as like an entertainment hub. So let me know your thoughts on this. Anyway, with all of that said, take care of yourselves, have an amazing day. Bye for now.